We're holding chapter 23, Perek Chav Gimel, Sefer Mishlei. He says as follows, Pasuk Aleph, Ki teshev lilchom et moshel bin tavin et asher lefanecha. The literal translation here is, if you sit down to dine with a ruler, you should understand well who is in front of you. It's very vague. It's hard to understand what he's talking about. And there are two completely different interpretations of what he says. And they both make sense. One is, he's advising us to be careful of politicians who want to wine and dine you. And they want to befriend you, and as the Rabbi tells us in Pirkei Avot and elsewhere, it's only because they have some interest. It's not true friendship. It's a relationship that you should be wary of. Bin tavin, in other words, pay close attention. It is not for your benefit. Be careful not to mingle too much. Sometimes we need to, obviously, get to know them and to plead for a certain cause, right? But otherwise, be careful, because they don't have necessarily your best interests in mind. So that is the first interpretation, that it's talking about politicians, it's talking about those who are in higher positions in the government. Be wary of them. Don't fall in their trap that they're laying. Even if they're wining and dining you, and they're showing that they want to be your friend, it's not real whatsoever. It's just a false front, and things haven't changed. They were always like this, and it will always be like that. Rabbi tells, be careful of the reshut meaning those that are in government position. The second interpretation is talking about something which several Pesukim are going to relate to it, and that is the individual who's called a tzar ayin. Tzar ayin in Hebrew means literally narrow eye. There are individuals out there who have this personality of being very stingy or miserly, even when it comes to their food. And they invite you. They tell you that, please come over, please come home for dinner, please spend some time with us. And they don't really mean it. They say it, but they don't really mean it. They don't want to have you. They don't want to share their food with you. You know, what's the big deal already? It's a sort of sickness. You know, what's the big deal? But some people have this problem, some people have this weakness. And he says, you don't want to be on the table of an individual who's a tzar ayin, who's a miser. And as we're going to see later on, what the problems are being at this individual's home. So therefore he says like this, Ki teshev lilchom et moshel, moshel being here not the ruler, but the one who's in control of the meal, your host. Bin tavin et asher lefanecha, pay close attention to what kind of a host he is. If he's kind and generous, or if he's miserly. And there's a lot you can tell by what is going on at one's meal. Who the individuals are, by the way they eat. You can tell a lot about the individual. So pay close attention, because you want to not to be around an individual who is a miser. Even though he makes believe that he wants to have you, it's not true. So the following pesukim are related. V'samta sakin belo'echa im ba'al nefesh ata. And you should put a knife in your jaw if you're a man with a hearty appetite. Now this pasuk also has two interpretations. It all depends how we understood the first pasuk. So I'm not going to go by this literal translation of Bal Nefesh meaning a hearty appetite, but Bal Nefesh can also mean an intelligent person, one who's concerned about himself, about his nefesh. You sometimes need to put a sakin. Sakin is a knife in your jaw. What for? Either we're talking about closing your mouth. Sometimes you're better off closing your mouth, not accepting a favor, not accepting a meal. If we're talking about an individual who's a miser, or if it's a favor being offered by a politician, you're sometimes just better off, Santa Sakin Belocha, it's an expression, put a knife in your jaw, shut your mouth. In other words, don't accept anything from these people. You're sometimes better off doing that. In Bal Nefesh Ata, if you care about yourself, if you're an intelligent man, you're better off. You're just better off not taking any favors from these individuals who don't really mean your best interest. According to another interpretation, where Bal Nefesh Ata is an individual who has like he says, a hearty appetite. And then we're talking about simple health advice. The Salomon Melech is telling us that one of those appetites that one has to be careful to restrain is the appetite of food, because it's not healthy. So sometimes the best diet is samta sakin beloecha, just not to eat. To avoid eating certain things, avoid not overeating. This is true. It's acceptable, and this fits into the words of the pasuk too. So they both could be right. Either way, there are times that one has to restrain himself from eating, whether it's eating at someone's home who is a miser, and it's not for our benefit to do so, or it's just watching one's weight, one's diet. Now he goes into explaining what's going on in this miser's home, or at the dinner table by some politician. Same idea. Do not desire his delicacies, for it's a bread of lies. So he's already telling us that many times what is being fed to you is lechem kezavim, bread of lies. What does that mean? In other words, it's all a trap. He does not really want to give you dinner. It's not that he's enjoying having you as a guest. And therefore he describes the food, the whole meal, take you out to lunch. Yeah, what's behind that, taking out to lunch? Maybe he wants to bribe you. I've had that happen. People, recommend, that you sometimes go out with a client, to gain his favor, I guess, to show that you care about him, that, you're treating him nicely. So if people do this in the business world, and it's acceptable, then obviously you have to be careful, because it's a form of bribery. So he's telling us, watch out for this. Pay close attention, because all of this is a bread of lies. And in the end, if it's politics, you will fall into this trap, and it will be hard to come out of it. Because once you've accepted a favor, you owe them something, and they're expecting it. And that's why he's saying, don't desire. Don't desire, meaning do not even have that interest of going or pursuing after their delicacies, for it's a bread of lies. Nothing good will come out of it. The next pasuk, even though it appears to be unrelated, it could very easily be related. It says like this: Al tiga le'ashir mibinatcha hadal. Do not wear yourself to grow rich. Do not wear yourself means do not try too hard to get rich. Mibinatcha hadal, cease from your own understanding. Two very important ideas in this pasuk. If this pasuk is related to the previous pasukim, then it fits very well, because the previous Pesukim, the individual out there may have some interest to become rich, to become important, to get into politics, and therefore he wants to befriend all these politicians. And Shlomo Melech says, be careful. It's not worth it. That's the way you want to become rich or important. Don't go for it. So that's what he says over here. Do not overdo it. Do not try too hard. But he's also talking in general terms. In general terms, a person should not try too hard to become rich. That should not be one's aspiration in life. And therefore he adds the words, Mibinatcha hadal, cease from your own understanding. What is the human being's own understanding? A human being's own understanding is that if he tries hard enough, maybe he will make it to the top. Maybe he will become rich. Shlomo Melech says, no. It has nothing to do with haritzut. Becoming rich has nothing to do with how much effort you apply. It has to do with Gzerat Hashem. If Hashem decreed it or not. If He put you into that mazal or not. Because if it's not within the mazal, then no matter what you do and how many hours you work, you just won't make it. So that's why he says, Mibinatcha hadal, cease from your own understanding. Don't rely on the way you see things, because we don't always see things correctly. That's why when one learns the Torah, Mishlei and the like, he receives the proper hashkafa, the proper attitude or outlook on how to see certain things. Because the human beings do not always see things correctly, properly. So therefore, it's not a good idea to pursue riches or to try too hard to become rich. You're better off trying to find yourself a mediocre job, a job where you can support yourself and your family, bechavod, as we say in Hebrew, with dignity, right? Whatever it is that pays the bills, as they say in this country. That's it. In other words, that should be at least your minimum. In other words, what you should strive for. What's the maximum? If Hashem yirtzeh, if Hashem wants it so, then of course, if He gives me a little bit more, then better. But what will I do with more? Not buy a Lexus or a Rolls Royce. I would give tzedakah with it. In other words, that's how one has to see. If he is blessed with more, it doesn't mean that he should enjoy it for himself. Maybe he should do some positive things with it. But to just aspire to riches as an aspiration, as this is a goal, no. Money is always meant to be just a means. It's not meant to be a goal that we have to pursue, that we have to want. And maybe it's not within one's mazal, therefore he says the words al tiga. Don't overwork yourself, because even if you made it, even if you did make all this money, look what he says in the next pasuk. Hata'if einecha bo ve'enenu, ki aso ya'aseh lo chenafayim kenesher ya'uf hashamayim. Very poetic way of expressing, of describing that easy come, easy goes. He says, should you blink your eyes at it, at the money? Let's say you had the zechut of blinking, setting your eyes on a lot of money. Should you blink your eyes at it, it is not here, for it will make wings for itself, like the eagle, and it will fly towards the heavens. In other words, the money will come, and before you know it, it has wings. It will fly away. In other words, even if you made it, it has no permanence. It's not something that you can call an acquisition that anybody can guarantee will remain with him. So therefore, it's never something that one should aspire for. If it's meant for him to have it, fine. If not, forget it. No matter how hard you try, it won't work. Rabbis tell us, I'm going to quote it to you here, if one does a lot of charity, then he will have the zechut, perhaps one day, of acquiring a lot of money. And im zachita lemamon, and if you somehow acquired money, make sure that you do with it tzedakah. As long as one is in olam hazeh, one has the opportunity to do something with his money to acquire olam haba. And if one does not do tzedakah from his money, then sooner or later, that money will ya'uf, it will fly away from him. And that is why some people have had money for a number of years, and then they lost it. Hashem gave them perhaps the opportunity, the nisayon, the test, to see what they will do with it. But they misused it. And therefore Hashem says, you're not a good bal pikadon, I cannot entrust it with you. After all, those who have more money than others, what they all have in common, even though the source of their money is from different sources, one is an inheritance, one is a beracha, one is a mazal, what they all have in common is that they have a big test, a big challenge. What are you going to do with it? You have several $1 million, how are you going to spend it? And the person says, you know what, I don't need it. I don't spend it on myself. I live a very, very simple life. Okay, that's very nice. But what's all that money doing, sitting there? It's very nice that you're not spending it on yourself, but you have to do the right things with it. And the answer to this is twofold. Some people don't have the zechut. Some people are simply misers. They're saving for a rainy day. They think that they're going to take it with them, or they're going to leave it over for the children, and they don't realize that the children are going to misuse it in a way that they never dreamt. Here the father is holding himself back from enjoying life, right? Skimping away, putting the money away, and eventually the kids splurge it. The parent does not always think of it. While one is alive, use the money wisely. As I've told you in the past, maybe, the story with the individual who approached the Chafetz Chaim and showed him a copy of his will. And in the will, it says like this, I'm leaving all the books that I own to the yeshiva, to the shuls, and I'm leaving all the money to my kids. And the Chafetz Chaim says, nah, you shouldn't do it that way, you should have done it the other way around. The shuls don't, and the schools don't need your books. They have enough books. They need your money. Your kids could use your books. Let them learn from the books. You should do it the other way around. So not everybody understands quite clearly what to do with the money. And when B'ezrat Hashem, one of these days, when we learn Kohelet, you will see how he makes fun, actually, of all these individuals who work so hard and never enjoy the money that they work so hard to acquire. All right, next pasuk. Now he goes back to explaining in a little bit more detail what's wrong with eating dinner at a miser's home. Al tilcham et lechem ra'ain. It's a famous pasuk. Ve'al tit'av lemat'amotav. Do not dine upon the bread of a stingy person, and do not desire his delicacy. Why not? What's wrong with eating at this individual's home? Can anyone here, try to figure this one out? The commentators don't really go into the psychology of this pasuk as to what's the problem. What is the exact problem of eating at somebody? Let's say he invites you and you go and eat. What's the big deal? What's wrong? What could be so bad at eating at this person's home? So what if he's a miser? You leave hungry? Let's say he really puts out a nice table. But remember, he's putting out the nice table just for show, right? And he doesn't want you to eat, as we're going to see soon. He would rather you not eat. But why shouldn't we eat? On the contrary, take everything.
You feel the vibrations, you feel that he's there, right?
Right. Therefore, what should be the problem?
Then you have a stomachache.
Okay, that may be true. I think that some commentators do say that you're going to get sick from it, because a person who is very stingy maybe put his evil eye into that food. You're going to get a stomachache from it. That's possible, because there's a word or two in the next Pesukim that say something like that eventually you're going to vomit it. So we'll get to that soon. Yeah, but there's something else here. In order to understand what is going on here, we have to go to the next pasuk. Apparently, this individual who's a tzar ayin, who's a ra'ayin, who has an evil eye, who's a miser, doesn't really mean it. He doesn't really mean it when he invites you. Therefore, the next pasuk follows: Ki kemo sha'ar benafsho ken hu echol ushte yomar lach velibo bal imach. For it is though as it is. Here he says. He translates, for it is as though it poured gall into his friend, so is he. He will tell you to eat and drink, but his heart is not with you. All right, that's his translation. The simple interpretation here is as follows. In the same way that he really does not want you to eat, before he invited you, he never had that intention that you should eat. That is the exact truth. That he does not want you to eat, even though he tells you to eat. In other words, kemo shar, it means in the exact same way that he assumed to himself, that he supposed that he would not want you to eat. That is what he really actually means, and therefore don't be misled by the fact that he tells you, my house is your house. Like they say in various languages. Make yourself comfortable. No, you should know that it's exactly the way he really means. And what's that? That you should not eat. Others say, Kemoshar ben Afsho means like those who imagine. When we imagine something, it's not necessarily so. All it is in our imagination. And the same is over here. It's all in the imagination. In other words, it's nothing. His words don't mean anything. They're meaningless. Because the reality is that he would rather you not be there. Why does he do it? Either to show off, or to give the impression. Yes.
Well, in that context, how do we know? Like, his purpose coming back to this world, for example, is to do Haknas Arachim.
Right.
Maybe he wants to work on that. He wants you to be his guest, so he can try to work it. Maybe we should be Damat Kaskus towards him.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That is why it says before, Bin Tavin et asher lefanecha. Pay close attention to the person who is in front of you. Try to figure him out if he's really trying, or he's really a miser. If somebody has that kind of a reputation, you don't want to eat at his place. Yes.
I don't think that someone who's a miser is going to try to not be a miser. I think it's a trait of character, and it stays like that.
No, but you can. It's very hard to maybe work on that, but one is capable of controlling himself. One is capable of overcoming something, even though it's almost impossible to eradicate or to eliminate a certain characteristics, because it's part of you, it's part of one's nature. But to train yourself into getting into a habit to do something, what is a habit? It's a second nature. So one can force himself and train himself to do things even though he's not easily inclined to do it.
Learning Torah helps you there, Rabbi, because it tries to teach
Learning
you.
Torah, learning Musar, and we're going to get to that soon too, the importance of learning Musar and applying it. But what's interesting about this, and he does speak about it throughout his Sefer, we've already mentioned it, I think, in the past, a little bit about this miser. There are individuals out there. And what does he say in Kohelet? En hadash tachat hashemesh, right? There's nothing new under the sun. There will always such people. There will always be. And you may be able to identify one. And you know what the difference between a miser and a stingy man is? Most people don't know the difference.
Some people won't even take care of themselves.
Of themselves. That's a real miser. Stingy for others, but for himself, he's okay. So I wouldn't even translate this as stingy the way he does. I would translate this more miserly. But it could be stingy because maybe he eats well himself. But ra'ain, a person who with a bad eye, the narrow eye, is usually even on his own for his own family. He's not very large. He's not very generous. But it's interesting that he would actually invite you and make believe. And deep down he says, I'd rather him not come. But I'm just saying, And you know what? A lot of people even say this to you. So when am I going to see you? When are you coming over? And they don't really mean it. Not because they're stingy, they're simply lying. That's just when will I see you next? When are you coming? Come again. Sure.
It's possible that they want to pay off. They come 10 times to your house to eat, and then they just try to invite you to pay off.
To pay off. But do they really mean it?
No, they don't mean it.
Oh, they don't mean it? Yeah, they are, yes.
I was going to ask too, Rabbi.
Yeah.
What's
indicative of it?
Miser not labor-dick, Rabbi? Is he generally not sociable, not social, not gregarious?
Well, what if you were sitting at someone's table and he was watching everything you eat? Okay? Something like that. Yeah.
What if the person is poor?
Right. There's another halakha for that.
I mean, you could be a miser because
You're not. There's a halakha. You cannot eat from a meal that is not enough for the host. You're not allowed to go to someone when you know in advance that he barely has enough for his own family. It's a halakha. You should not eat. You should not eat from someone's table if what he has is just barely enough for his own family.
How do you know sometimes?
You have to find. I mean, if you don't know, what is that? Obviously, you bring your own food. That's what some people do. They bring their own just to be on the safe side. Yeah.
Rabbi, people who are misers are not labor-dick. They're very more stiff. They're not sociable. They're not outgoing. Is that a trait of a miser, Rabbi? They're not very warm and well.
Well, obviously there are many. As far as indications, there are various indications. A person obviously who's not generous. He's not kind. He's not too friendly. And even though he's smiling at you, it's not a real smile. So there are, of course, signs, but it's hard to tell for sure. You would have to know from someone else. You've had to know this individual for a while, and you see how he is. He doesn't invite anybody. You see that he's very stingy in other areas, not necessarily with food, but with money. And after a while, people get to know him. And we've talked about it in the past that even the birds know who's a stingy man, and they don't come to eat from his seeds. We don't want to eat from the seeds of the stingy man. Yeah.
But if he's nice enough to put the food out for a bird.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it soon. Why shouldn't one go? We'll get to that in another pasuk. But in the meantime, he's telling us that there are people there who are fake, who put up a false front, and you don't want to be at their table. Then he says, "Pitecha achalta tekiena v'shihata devarecha ne'imim." You will vomit out your morsel that you ate, and you will lose your sweet words. As we said before, in the end, you will be disgusted. In other words, you won't like it. You won't enjoy it. And like you mentioned, you have an indigestion from it, possibly. In other words, this kind of bread will hurt you, apparently. Apparently, this is not healthy bread to eat from somebody who's a miser. And then he says, but the shihata devarecha ne'amim, and you will lose your sweet words. What does that mean? All the compliments that you gave him, all the good things you said about him will be in vain when you figure out that he never meant it anyway. He doesn't really care about you. So what a waste of time to spend time with him, to talk to him and praise the food, right? It's all in vain because it was never meant to be. So what's exactly the problem with eating at this individual's house? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, anybody who eats at the table of a ra'ain, of a stingy man, over alav echad. And the other rabbi says, over al shnei lavim. In other words, you're transgressing a sin or two. It's not a sin written in the Torah, but it's a sin written in the Sefer Mishlei. Even though he says, Al tilham et lechem ra'ain, and that could just be good advice. Don't eat at this man's table. It's not advisable. He doesn't really mean it. You're going to get sick from it. It's interesting that in the Gemara, they actually say, no, it's almost forbidden. You definitely don't want to do it. It's not just advisable not to do it. You don't want to do it. And if you do it, you're not doing the right thing. You're transgressing. You're going against the words of Shlomo Melech. Why? Why should it be forbidden? And I've tried to see if anybody talks about this. What is the problem of going there? And just, so what? Maybe we'll teach him a lesson or two. In Achnasat Orchim, like you were saying, giving the benefit of the doubt. Now we're talking about an individual that we know is a Ra'ain. Perhaps there is something similar to this. Perhaps one of the reasons is that you don't even want to give him the zechut of giving you food, of saying a beracha in his house. Because when one is invited, and when one comes and makes a blessing over the food that is being given, when he says Birkat HaMazon, and he blesses the host, this is all to the merit of the individual who invited him. You don't want to give him that merit because he doesn't really mean it. He's not for real. Therefore, don't support him because he doesn't really mean it anyway. He doesn't mean it to do for the mitzvah. He doesn't want to have the Achnasat Orchim. So therefore, Al tilham et lechem ra'ain. Don't go and enjoy and partake from the bread of this miser. What else could it be? It could also be that one should not give him the kavod, because this is a form of kavod. When you accept somebody's invitation, he doesn't deserve the kavod, right? This kind of an individual. Plus, perhaps another idea would be is that this is the only way to teach him a lesson. How will he ever know that what he's doing is wrong? Nobody's coming to your house because we know you really don't mean it. Maybe eventually at some point he's going to get the message. How do we give him the musar that what he's doing is wrong? How do we change him? If we go, we're not really gaining anything, and we're not really helping him out because he's suffering throughout this whole meal. Oh, he's eating. Yeah, the people feel terrible that the guy is eating. They count every cucumber. You know why I said cucumber? Because the Persians love cucumbers. Pickles. So anyway, he's counting every cucumber. How much is he putting in his plate? It's terrible. Don't invite him to begin with. But this is a two-faced person. He doesn't want to be known as a miser on the one hand, right? So he's inviting people, but he's already thinking, I hope he doesn't accept the invitation. And these people do exist in all communities at all times. And that's what he said before, bin tavin. In other words, pay close attention to who you're dealing with. You don't want to be at someone's home who doesn't really enjoy having you. Maybe the idea here is also not to give him the kavod, and maybe the idea is to send the message, or simply not to give him the zechut. He doesn't deserve it if he does not do it belev shalem, with wholeheartedly. Doesn't deserve it. All right, now we're going over to another individual. We spoke enough about the stingy man. And this pasuk is similar to what we've seen before. A lot of the ideas in Mishlei are repeated, and every time he adds something else, or he emphasizes it even more. In other words, even though there is a mitzvah to give musar, to talk to certain people, there are certain individuals you don't want to talk to. One of them is the kesil. He's going to make fun of your words. And the rabbis tell us, in the same way that there is a mitzvah to say words that are going to be heard and heeded, there's also a mitzvah not to say something that won't be heeded. They won't accept it. Now we don't know sometimes if an individual is a kesil or not. All we know is that he's our relative, that we have some influence over him, then we are obligated to tell him what is right and what is wrong. We have to teach, we have to rebuke if something is wrong, if it's within our reach, if we can control the situation, we have some degree of influence. our children, our relatives, right? A rabbi over his community, depending on if it's something that is forbidden according to the Torah, if it's a rabbinical decree. There are various halachot on how to handle a situation when the chances are 50-50 that the individual will listen to you. Then not only do you have nothing to lose, you have a lot to gain. You will have a mitzvah, and it could be an obligation. So at least try once. If he doesn't listen, then you've done yours. At least you've done your mitzvah. But there are some individuals that you're better off not even talking to them because they're going to make fun. And the rabbis tell us that even if these individuals are in a crowd and everybody else will listen, but that individual is going to make fun, that you don't want to say it. You may want to say it in different ways so that individual should not make a joke of this whole thing. So there are individuals out there who are kesil, who are fools, or who are letzim, mockers, that al tidaber, don't speak to them, ki yavuz lesechel milecha. He's going to make fun of it. He's going to despise the sense of your words. That's how he translates it. And therefore, why waste your time with him? It's not going to go anywhere. If you feel that he will listen, then that's something else. Sometimes we don't know. Here he's talking about an individual who's totally not serious, who's not interested. Don't waste your time. Unless you feel that this is something very important, then say it once. Saying something once, you don't really lose anything. Especially if you don't get into a lengthy conversation with him. And it may be that at some point he will listen. Maybe now he won't. So at least he heard it. Depending on what it is, because there's another rule that says mutav shiyu shogegim v'lo yu mezidin. Sometimes it's better for an individual to be a shogeg and not a mezid, to do something unintentional. Before you let him know that it's a sur, he never knew that it was a sur. Now that you're telling him, now he knows the truth and he still won't do it, so now he's going against the Torah intentionally. So depending on the circumstances, depending on what it is that you want to tell him, or depending on the chances of whether he will listen or not, but usually, for the most part, if it's something that is clearly written in the Torah, and you have some degree of influence over this person, you come in touch with him, and there's a chance that he may listen, then you need to tell him. But if he's a kesil, and you've tried in the past, and nothing works, nothing whatsoever works, then don't bother with him. Yes? Well, you do need to be sensitive, and we're going to talk about that soon with one's child, how to do it in a way that you don't drive him away from it, and definitely that you don't insult someone. The Torah says when you do give rebuke, do not bear a sin as a result. And one of the explanations of do not bear a sin is that when you do rebuke, do not insult, do not offend someone. And you obviously have to be careful. If you want to be effective, you want to be tactful, you want to be convincing, and you can be indirect sometimes. If it's your father or mother, you have no choice. You have to be indirect. You know, Daddy, I remember in the Shulchan Aruch it says this and this. You didn't tell him, you're wrong. This is not right. You can't do that. First of all, if it's your father or mother, you have the kavod av and him, the respect you have to give them. And even if it's not your father or mother, if you want to be effective, you don't want to sound like you're harping on them, going after them. You want to convince them that this is for their benefit. So you have to use your creativity in how to best give over that information to them. Yeah.
What if you're like you're teaching an Arachim seminar and you have a bunch of people, and one person is a late in there, Rabbi?
Anybody usually goes to a seminar is curious at least. He may not be very serious, but he's at least curious. Otherwise, he really wouldn't be there. Yeah. So I don't think. I mean, they've had people who really attacked the lecturer, criticized.
What would you
But
do
most of them softened up at the end of the seminar after they heard everything. So, and you have to know how to deal with them, so they don't disturb the whole lecture.
If you said the pursuit said,
Yeah.
don't even talk to them, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Because they could ruin the effect of all the other people.
Sure, of course, yeah. And we spoke about this a couple weeks ago. Garesh letz, it was throw out the scorner. V'yitzeh madon. In other words, when you want to have no problems, you want to remove the source of the problems. And it was a troublemaker. And sometimes you have to do that. Yeah. All right. The next pasuk is similar to what we've seen just I think in last perek. Al taseg gevul olam ubisdei yetomim al tavo. But before we get to that pasuk, the rabbis also tell us that when it comes to giving out pearls of wisdom, don't throw out the pearls of wisdom in front of pigs. If the individuals are compared to pigs, you don't want to throw out pearls. It's just a way of saying, do not share the wisdom with those who won't appreciate it. Do not remove an ancient boundary, and do not enter the fields of the orphans. The pasuk that we had before was also talking about not moving a boundary. Back in the previous perek, we spoke about the boundaries of customs and traditions, that they are in place for a certain reason. You don't want to eliminate anything from our tradition because it's there for a reason. That's also Givul Olam, it's meant to stay forever, even though the situation may have changed. Right? I gave the example of not eating rice on Pesach for Ashkenazim, or for Moroccan Jews who follow that custom too. There's a reason for that custom. You don't change it even though you say times have changed, things are different. Some things were meant to be there forever. Here he's also talking about the other idea that we mentioned there, is not to encroach or not to take land that does not belong to you when you're building a fence between two neighbors, not to build it on the other side. You have to build it halfway or inside of your property. You have to be careful not to take that which is not yours. In the second part of the pasuk, and do not enter the fields of the orphans to take from their field, to take from their food, from their crop. Unless, for example, let's say a tree. This happens a lot. Let's say their tree, some of the branches are hanging over your property, and there's some avocados. Well, it's hanging over your property, right? But you can't just chop it off either. You have to ask permission. Yeah, first of all, you want to be in good terms with your neighbor. This might be a very good tree. You have to ask him to do it or ask him permission for you to do it. But obviously to go intentionally into their field to take what is theirs is definitely forbidden. What's the chidush over here? In other words, why he's pointing this out? Well, for two reasons. First of all, it's a problem. It was always a problem that people think it's okay for them to take what belongs to others. Maybe because the guy is not makpid. What's the big deal? Well, if he's not makpid, why don't you just ask him to be sure and not commit the avon of gezel? Second of all, he emphasizes here the field of yetomim. So he obviously is saying this for a reason. The field of orphans. In the last perek, we talked about the field of the property of those who are poor or destitute. What do they two have in common? These two individuals are weak. They may not have a good lawyer, and there are people who will take advantage of those who are weak. You think they're weak? Comes along the next pasuk, Shlomo Melech tells us, Ki go'alam chazak hu. Ki go'alam chazak hu yariv et rivam itach. You think they're weak? Maybe so, but for their Redeemer is mighty. He will plead their cause with you. You think they're weak? Maybe so. But their Redeemer, Hashem, He's strong. He's mightier than you. And He'll come after you. He will come after those who take advantage of the poor and of the weak. So don't forget, he says, don't think that you can get away with it. Some people think they can get away with it. Nobody will stand up for them. Hashem will. Bring your heart to discipline and your ear to words of knowledge. He's spoken about the importance of musar, and he talks about it all the time. What he's saying over here is that it's not enough to listen to all these beautiful meshalim, all these beautiful proverbs. It's important to apply it. Havi ala musar libecha, bring it into your heart. Don't just listen to it and say, oh, how beautiful, how nice, it makes sense. Yes, I've seen this situation. No, apply it. Apply it in your life. And now we've come to the area of discipline of one's children. Now, the following pesukim, quite a few pesukim, I think even leading a little bit into the next chapter, have all to do with the discipline of one's child, of one's children. And there are several pesukim that we've already covered about that. Remember about Chosech Shifto Soneh Beno? In other words, do not hold back your whip. Whoever holds back his whip and ends up hating his child. I would add he ends up hating himself for not having used his whip. And here he explains a little bit more in detail why it's a good idea to use the rod of discipline. Let's not use the word whip. Whip is for an animal. He says, do not withhold discipline from a child when you strike him with a rod, he will not die. Now he's telling us why people would hesitate to use the rod. There are those who don't believe in it. Well, they're wrong. He told this to us already before. It's wrong. You have to use discipline. What does a child know? What about those who really are so fearful that they don't want to inflict any pain on their child? What? Traumatize him. Yeah. Well, it says, you know what? Kitakenu b'shevet lo yamut. He's not going to die. Do it. Now, when he says do it, he's not talking about a makar, zarit. He's not talking about being cruel and overdoing it. He's talking about softly and gently. But he's got to get the point that the father is upset at him. Hashem hits us over the head too when we don't listen. Yeah, and sometimes he hits very hard. It's the pocketbook, and sometimes it's more than the pocketbook. Right? So Hashem does it the same way. Is it not right? Of course it's right. Otherwise we don't get the message. So how is a child going to get the message if it's not with a shevet, with a rod? So first he's trying to calm down those parents, and especially the mothers maybe, who are sensitive. Oh, you're going to hurt him. He's not going to die, lady. Bashevet lo yamut. He's not going to die. Nothing's going to happen to him if you just do it a little bit. And you know what you're going to gain? Look at the next pasuk. Ata bashevet takeno v'nafsho mishaol tatzil. You should strike him with a rod, and you will save his soul from the grave. You may actually be saving his life. You may actually be saving his neshama from Gehenom if you give him the lesson early on. Later on, you're not going to be able to do it. Once he's a teenager, forget it. It's going to be too hard. Once he's past the teenager years, what is it to do? So the time to do it is when he's still young, because that's the only language he understands. That may be the only thing that will help him. So do so, because even though he may get hurt a little bit, let's say it will be painful, but you know what? You will gain much more than what you will lose, or he will gain more than what he will lose. In other words, the pain is so small compared to the gain that he will gain from this rod that will show him the right from the wrong. So consider all of this. Next pasuk. Benim chacham libecha yismach libi gam ani. My son, if your heart has grown wise, my heart too will rejoice. Here he's talking, again, continuing with the discipline of children, the teaching of children. When a child learns Torah, the parent gains a lot too. Some parents don't realize this, and he will explain soon how they gain. There's a tremendous amount for a father to gain, for a parent to gain, if the child has learned, has become a chacham. That truly brings joy, true nachat, when a child is smart. And then he explains, "V'ta'alozno chilyotai v'daber sefatecha mesharim." Let your heart and my reins shall rejoice when your lips speak right things. So the commentary explains, if this child not only learns Torah but is able to teach it to others, v'daber sefatecha mesharim, when he does so in giving it over to others, that brings even more happiness to a father. The rabbis tell us that this happiness that comes to the father is not only in Olam Hazeh, it's also in Olam Haba. Every child shemechadesh b'Torah me'ater et Abba shelo be'Olam Haba. Every child that is mechadesh, in other words, that says new things on Torah, teaches Torah, it brings tremendous kavod to his dad in Olam Haba. As you know, once one has departed from this world, there's not too much he can do for himself. In the Kaddish, and the blessings, and the Mishnayot, and the Tzedakah, and the Torah, that help the father give him a boost, an aliyah neshama. And that's how here, in other words, that's how here he explains that it's not only for the benefit of the son, it's for the benefit of the father that the son continue to learn Torah as much as possible. Rabbis also tell us that a father does not envy his child, neither does a rabbi, a teacher, envy his child. These two don't envy the individual. They don't have any envy of the young man who's going to pass them, who's going to excel much more than they did. On the contrary, they would be happy when it makes them proud of him. Yes.
By that content, the previous pursuit, does a mechanic have a prerogative to also use a rod, Rabbi, or is it only the parent we're talking about here? Could a teacher do that of a cater? Could they do that, Rabbi?
Do what?
Use the rod if a kid needs discipline, a teacher.
Obviously, yeah. That's the way it always used to be until they outlawed it in this country. But I think in other countries in the world it's still acceptable. Means as long as you don't overdo it. There are individuals out there, teachers, who are very abusive. You know what they say in Israel? Who becomes a policeman? Those who were in the underground. Those who like to hit others. Those who like to beat up on others. They make very good policemen. Unfortunately, that's the kind of police they have there today. You know, bullies, I think they call it in English. You know, and it's not good. You know, because they don't have any rachamim. And you know, you have to have a little bit of mercy too. You have to watch it, be very careful, and know when to strike and when not to strike. They don't know. They don't have any limits, unfortunately. So yes, in the school, they have to know how to apply it, when to apply it, under what circumstances.
Halakhically, they're allowed to.
Sure they are. So anyway, the commentators explain on this pasuk, "V'ta'aloz na kilyotai," my reins shall rejoice when your lips speak right things. That the greatest simcha that a parent can have, the greatest joy, is the simcha of Torah. And one may not be so aware of this in the beginning. And that's the famous story of Urkenos and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, as a young man, wanted to go learn Torah. And his brothers were very upset at him that he's not helping their father in his older age to plow the fields, to take care of the business. And they told the father, let's go and remove him from all your Yerusha, that he should have no part of your inheritance. Go and excommunicate him. Teach him a lesson. Threaten him that if he does not come back to work, you know, this is what will happen to him. And eventually, when the father finally caught up and he went to Yerushalayim, he realized what his son had achieved in all this time of learning. The greatest people in town, the greatest people in the community, the richest and the famous, were sitting, listening to his Dvar Torah. And you can imagine the kavod that this man had by seeing that his son is one of the greatest rabbis. Whereas in the beginning he thought that the son is, you know, terrible, what he's doing, rebelling and going against him. But the father was basically seeing the Torah, the simcha of Torah. That's the greatest nachat ruach that a father can have, is when his child grows in Torah, much more than that he grows in money, that he grows in real estate, in possessions. That doesn't truly bring simcha. When a child grows in Chokhmah and in Torah and Yirat Shamayim, especially when one has gone to Olam HaEmet and he already knows the truth. Here people are misled to believe that certain things have value and other things don't. But when one is for sure in the Olam HaEmet, there's nothing greater than to see that his children and grandchildren, all his descendants, are going in his way. That gives him more simcha than anything else in the world. And that was the story with Kalba Savua, with Rabbi Akiva. His daughter wanted to marry Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was an ignoramus. He said, you want to marry him? No way. I'm going to disown you. Because he didn't want an amaretz for son-in-law. But when Rabbi Akiva became who he became, obviously, that was a whole different story. Then he went out to help him. They appreciated the value of Torah because there's nothing greater than Torah. There's no greater simcha than Torah. And that this simcha is not only in Olam Hazeh, it's also in Olam Haba. The last pasuk that we're going to do today, pasuk Yud Zayin, Al yikaneh libecha b'chataim ki b'yirat Adonai kol hayom. Let your heart not envy the sinners, but fear of Hashem all day. Here he is talking about all those who aspire to be like the movie stars. Al yikaneh libecha b'chataim. Those sinners, you think they have a good life? You think they have a good marriage just because they smile on TV? Just because they look good? They're terrible people. They drink, they smoke, they don't have manners. You don't even know what they're like. You don't see the whole picture. Be careful not to emulate, not to want to have what the sinners have, because you don't want to be like them. What should you aspire? All day you should aspire to emulate those who are God-fearing. And instead of having pictures in one's room of all this trash, if you want to have pictures of Talmidei Chachamim. Seeing those pictures maybe will leave some impression on one. They will have some impact. One will want to be like them, follow in their footsteps. That is the aspiration that one should have. Do not be envious, he says, because some people think, you know, this guy made it. He's making millions of dollars. And all he does is play basketball all day. For throwing a ball into the basket his salary, what is it, $3 million today or whatever? No. Don't think of being like them. I'm not calling them all sinners, but just as an example, don't follow in their footsteps. That's not what you want to do. You don't want to be envious of them. There's nothing to be envious of them. Why? Why not? Because Kim yesh acharit v'tikvatcha lo tikaret. For because of this, there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Their future may be cut off. It may not last forever. Not only may not, it for sure won't last forever, because nothing lasts forever except for Torah. That's why he says over here, there's no reason for you to want to be like them. Kim yesh acharit v'tikvatcha lo tikaret. You do have an acharit. You do have a future, because the future of Torah is in Olam Haba too. It's not only here. Money is left behind. Money does not have a future. Fame does not have a future. Once the guy leaves, anybody remember here now Will Chamberlain? Anybody talk about him? He's gone. Yeah, during the time he used to play, okay, fine. But whatever happened? Does anybody go visit him in the cemetery? You sure? Anybody say Kaddish over him? For sure not. Right? So what's doing with his neshama? I'm not going to even try to guess. Right? There's no need to emulate, to aspire to be like the sinners. They have no acharit. There's no future. You have a future. A Jew has a future. A Jew has something to look forward. All his good investment, all the efforts, all the time that he spent in making a menshav out of himself, a God-fearing person, that will buy him his ticket to Olam Haba, B'ezrat Hashem. That's something that you should emulate. Therefore, go after those who are God-fearing. Emulate them, and B'ezrat Hashem, you will be like them. This is not only an important lesson for children, it's also important for adults. Not to think, oh, I have to be like him. I have to make it just like him. That has no acharit. All those worldly acquisitions don't really have a future. They're really not meaningful at all. And many of them are not even good people. They're hatayim. Instead, think about those tzaddikim, emulate them, aspire to be like them. That is a real goal that one should pursue. That is a true achievement if one, B'ezrat Hashem, acquires it. Okay, we'll continue B'ezrat Hashem next week.